1. Something you should know is that I have a very silly sense of humor. I don't tell dad jokes, I tell grandpa jokes. Jokes so corny they make everyone groan and roll their eyes. This is relevant, because I sometimes think of a good pun and then sit on it for ages before dropping it at just the right moment. Sometime late last year, a funny phrase popped into my mind. It had to do with the old balding pilots who fly for one of our nation's biggest air travel businesses, American Airlines. I giggled to myself, imagining it as a slogan, above a beaming man in a flight uniform, arms akimbo, hairline so receded it's behind his ears, scalp shining proudly. Later, I decided it would be funnier to have 3 old pilots standing together, all in various stages of male pattern baldness. Might make a funny little comic or doodle. For some reason, that phrase kept coming back to my mind for months. American Airlines. I didn't think much of it since I'm always collecting and mulling over silly puns. Then I forgot about it for a bit. So imagine my surprise as I'm driving into the Chicago airport last week and see a giant billboard that says American Airlines, with, if I recall correctly, 3 balding men on it. It was an ad for hair restoration. This is in no way too strange to be a coincidence, but it's still strange. I had my whole life to think of that joke, and I just happened to think of it months before this ad campaign. It could very well have come to me at the exact same time as it came to the creator of that ad. I think of Russell Wallace, to whom the idea of natural selection came spontaneously in a fever dream, at the same time his friend Darwin was hard at work privately on the same. I think of how many people attest that they jumped out of bed suddenly the moment their family member on the opposite side of the country was in trouble. I think of the 100th monkey theory, and the idea that if a certain thought is loud enough, or disseminated to enough people, someone else might hear it without knowing where it came from. Or somebody happened to think of the same oddly specific dumb joke around the same time as me. 2. As I begin to write, I'm getting a sense that I'm supposed to be doing this right now, and that someone specific needed to hear this. I'm going to jump right in, and then give you a backstory, but first I'll say that whatever path I'm on was chosen for me. I chose this for myself. It happened a few months ago, post-COVID. I was waiting for my train in a subway in New York City while on the phone. I had this feeling to look to my left, but I was already looking before I thought about the feeling itself. There I was, well, but she was me, and I knew it. She was peering out a small crowd, waving at me and smiling. She looked so happy to see me that the smile was borderline menacing. But honestly, it's what happens to me on this plane when I'm very happy. However, I felt more safe than freaked out, but I was very freaked out. The person I was on the phone with has witnessed my spiritual evolution, and has known what my life was before my life state now. So I immediately tell my friend what happened, with no true answer since. Until today, by talking to a new friend, and going through Reddit. I, meant to grab my attention, I know it. Some part of me understands that she knows I am now aware, or at least partly aware of who she is. A lot of stories I've heard and read seemed accidental to some degree, but this seemed like she deliberately came to see me, and then, just like that, she got lost in the crowd and I haven't seen her since. Apparently we, as humans, aren't meant to go from plane to plane in our dimension like that. You have to be at a particular frequency and vibration to access that ability. But something about me feels different, even when I talk to friends that are also spiritually inclined and gifted. Most of the time, I feel like I'm ahead of them, however, I understand their path isn't mine. For example, I've time-traveled before via my consciousness and a quartz crystal. It was an accident. Truth be told, a lot of my abilities are discovered solely through accidents. I hope this message finds who needs it. I am looking forward to whatever comments land my way. Love and light. Addition, in response to a comment. I was at the train station platform waiting for the train to arrive. I was headed downtown, but I don't remember why. I'm on the phone with a really good friend of mine, PJ. PJ is in my headphones. I'm blabbing my gums talking about God knows what. I know I can't remember, but I also don't think that part is relevant. In all honesty, now that I think about it, it feels like she just came to say hi, or for me to know that she's out there. Okay, so I'm on the phone with PJ, and I'm waiting for my train to arrive to head downtown Manhattan. I get this sensation to turn left. It felt like someone was looking at me. You know that feeling you get when someone is staring at you and you look directly in their line of sight without even thinking about it? It was like that. But before I realized that someone was looking at me, my head was already starting to turn. It was an involuntary head turn motion. It's like she was waiting for me to look at her, and my head just moved. After my head turns, I can't believe what I'm looking at. It's me with a colorful striped shirt peering out of a small crowd. She, I, is vigorously waving at me with wide eyes and an even wider smile. I felt my heart sink and my stomach drop. I immediately start freaking out and almost forgot I was on the phone. By freaking out, I mean I started to speak loudly, feel panicked, curse. And then I started to approach the crowd. By the time I start motioning towards her, she just dips back into the crowd and I haven't seen her since. I scoured the crowd looking for her, but she wasn't there. And that top was kinda hard to miss. I remember telling PJ over and over again, I know what I saw, I'm not crazy. I just saw me wave at me. And other stutters and stammers that resonate with that. I remember feeling creeped out, violated, and intruded on, yet somehow safe. Like she meant no harm. I think she was just excited to see me. I hope this helps fill in the blanks. 3. A few years ago, back in 2018, I was working at a fast food restaurant. The day started normal, then after about 3 hours into the shift, I started to feel very ill out of nowhere, and at the time, I did not have any known health issues, still do not, or a reason to even start feeling ill. I proceeded to walk towards the bathroom, and for some strange reason, something told me not to go in there and to turn around and go back to the lobby. While I was turning around, that's when it hit me. My vision started to turn a fuzzy black and white, similar to how TVs back in the day would look if you'd turned to the wrong channel. All of a sudden, everything started to turn fuzzy, and then it just went black. I remember hearing a loud thud, and then I remembered saying, "What the fuck was that?" Not knowing it was me that I was hearing. It was like I was there, but I wasn't. Coworkers told me I was unconscious for at least 15 minutes, but it felt like I gained consciousness back fast to me. Fast forward to last week, a new job, entire shift is going fine, then I start to feel very ill out of nowhere. I started walking towards the bathroom, and it was like everything was just dimming out. I was experiencing tunnel vision, my hearing even went out all the way, to the point I couldn't even hear the machinery, a warehouse job, and I was just thinking I was going to fall out any moment, but the minute I stepped into the bathroom, it's like everything came back. But this time it went so far, it felt like I was transitioning in a way. The way my body felt when I entered the bathroom is unexplainable. I was so uncomfortable, and the pain was so unbearable. I was literally in the stall suffering, and after about 20 minutes, it subsided. After all this, I noticed small changes in my life. But I'm just curious, am I blacking out or actually jumping dimensions? The few changes I noticed are with people and my relationship with them. A big one was my current job. The other day, me and my coworker were going back and forth about a manager who I thought worked there, which I'm sure did because I've spoke to him. And she says she's never heard of him and didn't know who I was talking about. She even went as far as to say she's been there longer and never heard of him. Which was odd to me because I know for sure he worked there. Also, after the 2018 incident, everything just changed. The same fast food place had an entire different crew. I went to visit after the incident, and everyone I worked with was replaced. My relationships with others and even my interests changed. 4. Around 5 years ago, I moved to a new school during my senior year of high school. I didn't necessarily have trouble making friends as I joined the football team, and they were very welcoming of me. I enrolled in this sort of advanced PE class that was for the athletes in the school. That is when I met a dude named Tyler, who was a grade younger than me and was also on the football team. We instantly got along, and he became probably my best friend at the school. We would hang out outside of school, but for some reason he never wanted to come over to my house, and never wanted me to come over to his house. I didn't think too much of it. Anyway, I graduated that year, and we haven't really talked much since. We would occasionally text about the NFL, but nothing more than that. I had a dream last night about the guy, and when I woke up, I figured I would text him and see how he was doing. I couldn't find his contact in my phone, but that's not uncommon, as I've had several new phones since I was in high school. I asked some of my old high school buddies if they had Tyler's number, and they acted like they had no idea who I was talking about. I even searched social media to see if I could contact him through that, but still couldn't find him. I was feeling like I was losing my mind, so I asked one of my old buddies if they found him in the yearbook from that year, and he said he could not. I didn't bother to purchase a yearbook that year because that was my only year at the school. I even checked out MaxPreps, a website that recorded high school football rosters and stats, but I didn't find him on there either. After a couple of hours of syncing iCloud photo data to my phone, I ended up finding a picture of me and him, but nobody seems to recognize him. I have no idea what's going on, and I was wondering if anybody has shared a similar experience. A couple of people have asked me if I got his name confused. I guess it's possible, but I have a pretty solid memory of the guy's name because his first name was my middle name, and we used to call each other Tyler at the mall and stuff to confuse people. I absolutely remember his last name too. After requesting records from my high school, they told me they could not give out any personal data, but they did say nobody by that name ever attended the school. Also, after paying a professional website to go through the picture I had of him, they could not find any matches. After talking to several people from my high school from social media, all but one person said they had no recollection of him. The only other person said they did remember me hanging out with one specific kid that he couldn't remember, but couldn't verify it was Tyler. This whole experience has been pretty mind-blowing. I really do appreciate everyone's comments and messages. The most plausible explanation here is that he was possibly in witness protection. But wouldn't more people remember him? Especially being on the football team at a rather large public high school. Speaking of which, I've combed through pictures and rosters from several websites of our team, and there is no trace of him. Sometimes there are things in life that are genuinely unexplainable. However, sometimes you just have to accept these conditions, which I'm slowly learning to do. Thank you all for helping me on this bizarre mental journey. 5. I recently met up with some old friends, and this story from 20 years ago came up. It's something I have never forgotten, and have never been able to explain. Before I begin, I want to make it perfectly clear that none of us were drunk. There is no alcohol involved in this story whatsoever. Bit of setup. I live in a small town in England. The road I lived at the time on runs parallel to the high street with several pubs and one nightclub. Another road runs vertically to connect the two. Think of a capital I with the lines on the top and bottom. The local nightclub is at the bottom of the I, and my flat at the top. It's a straight road, 10-minute walk from one end to the other. On to the story. Myself and 4 friends found ourselves in the local nightclub at around 11 p.m., stone cold sober, and we were queuing at the bar to get our first drinks of the night. Just before we got served, there was a power cut. Emergency lights came on, everyone escorted out of the club. The whole town was out. It was the middle of winter, so we decided to cut our losses and went back to mine. And finally have a drink. It was no later than 11:45 at this point, probably a bit earlier. We started to walk back to mine. It was incredibly dark and eerie. So we did what I think anyone would do in that situation. We tried to scare the crap out of each other. The walk was otherwise uneventful. We got back to mine and started fumbling around in the dark looking for a light source. We settled in, and I started making us some long-awaited drinks. That's when one of my friends asked what the time was. Thinking this was another spooky story, I waited for the rest of it. I remember her voice chilling me when she said, "Now seriously, what's the time?" We all looked at our watches. All were showing 3:20, except one which had stopped at 1:05 a.m. We don't know if that's important, because sometimes watches just stop. None of us remember anything unusual, aside from the power cut, but somehow we lost around 3.5 hours on a 10-minute walk. While talking about this, my friends and I did create an approximate timeline of that entire evening, to see if there were any gaps we could fill. Some of us remember things others don't, but it was 20 years ago, so I figure that's normal. We mostly recall it the same, and none of us have any idea where the 3.5 hours went. The whole night was weird, but explainable up to that point. 6. My boyfriend and I moved into a new home at the beginning of the pandemic, April 2020. Upon moving in, all boxes were placed in the garage, and the only things in the house were the largest pieces of furniture: sofas, coffee tables, beds, and a piano. The house had a wonderfully lit display case, and I decided to unpack the precious items box so I could spend the evening placing each delicate item in the display case and then sit and enjoy it with my boyfriend. When I opened the box, I was devastated to see that my mother crow Kachina doll had lost half her crow feathers. They were made of wood, and she had huge feathered pieces that enveloped each side of her head, a right side and a left side. Worse yet, the missing crow feathers for the right side of her head weren't with the packaging, even though I had packed her as a whole piece. I found this supremely odd, as I packaged the piece myself, and even if it had broken off during packing and the move, I would have expected to find the broken pieces with the packaging, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I told my boyfriend, and we both began looking in the box and on the floor for it. After intense searching, we were both completely at a loss for where it could have gone to. We looked all over the house, which was silly because it was completely empty except for large pieces of furniture, and found nothing. We checked the box it came in again, and nothing. It was absolutely nowhere to be found. During this time, we were both up and moving around, and neither of us ever found it. After a while, we gave up, sat on the couch, and lamented the loss. It was a gorgeous, authentic Zuni piece representing the mother of creation. He had given it to me for my birthday, and I cherished it. We both took it as a bad sign that it had not only broken during the move, but that we couldn't even fix it because we couldn't find the missing piece anywhere. We had some whiskeys, talked of other things, and went to bed. The next day we enter the living room and see the missing feather piece for the mother crow placed in an easy view on top of the armrest of the couch, a spot we were both around a lot the night before. And somehow, the next morning, it's suddenly just right there and absolutely impossible to miss. Neither one of us could believe it. There is no way it was there the night before, and neither one of us placed it there. The house was virtually empty, so it's not like it would have been hard to find. It seemed to literally appear out of nowhere the next day, and was in such a visible place there's no way we would have missed it when looking for it the night before. We talk about the strangeness to this day, and still really don't know what happened or how it got there. 7. Yesterday, myself, 29 female, and my fiancé, 29 male, and I went to a lake about 20 minutes from our house. We're very outdoorsy and love a lake day, and we love this lake in particular because we found a great secluded swimming area. You have to hike like 2 miles to get there after parking, so it's often either empty or just adult couples hanging out, sometimes families with older kids. The hike there is one narrow paved road with the mountainside on one side, and a steep drop-off into the riverbed on the other side, so there's absolutely no way around it and no alternate routes. We also asked the park ranger the first time hiking it, and he confirmed it's the only trail to this swimming area. So yesterday we park and start walking, and we notice a guy and his 2 kids exploring the trail a bit, walking back and forth like he's trying to figure out where the lake is. Pretty common occurrence. They were a memorable bunch because the father and son both had bleached sections of hair. Dad had dreads with a few of them bleached, and his son had a bleached mohawk with black hair on the sides. They're walking back in the direction of the parking lot, opposite direction we're going, and he asks us where the lake is, and I tell him about 2 miles ahead. We keep walking, and I hear his daughter yell, exacerbated behind us, 2 miles? And they kept going towards the parking spot. We completed the hike, and it was very quiet. No other people on the trail that we saw. It would have been pretty difficult to miss others since this is a secluded area, and if someone wanted to pass us, we would have had to stop to let them pass, since the trail is pretty narrow and we had our dog with us. So we get to the lake and set up at a picnic table, and I turn to take in the scenery when suddenly I see the same family. They're already set up, and the kids are even swimming. It's like they've been there for a while already. I ask my fiancé if that's the same family and how they beat us there. He confirms it's the same bunch, but also has no idea. The only thing we could think of is if they walked in the riverbed, but we would have heard their voices echo down there, and any path down there is completely overgrown with trees and shrubbery. So how would they even hike it? And why would they choose to be down there when there's a perfectly good paved trail? And they'd been going in the opposite direction as us when we saw them earlier. 8. Has anyone else fast-forwarded in time while exercising? I gained 17 minutes on a 1-hour run, mysteriously. I've been running for over 2 decades now. Because I've run so much, it may be the thing I know best in life right now. I know how long my runs usually are, how fast I run, all the details. Normally, I run for 1 hour on the beach, on Ocean Beach in San Francisco. That means a 30-minute run out and a 30-minute run back. Let's call those the 2 legs. And normally the difference between the legs is on the order of 1 to 2 minutes. Yesterday I experienced something abnormally greater than that, which I still can't puzzle out. My run started very normally. I remember on my way out the door looking at the stove clock and thinking it's a little past 10:04 or something. I cross the street, and there's kind of a big group of ravens on the ground. Gulp. I plowed through the middle of them. I wasn't trying to be rude or to purposefully antagonize them. The path to the beach went through their group. Maybe one of them moved away from me, hopped a few feet away. I was a little disruptive, but not, I don't think, excessively so. I felt like one of them glared at me, but I didn't make much of it. So I get to the beach, very close to where I live. It's windy and cold. I decided to go right this time instead of my usual left. I check my watch. It says something 21. To explain the vagueness, I used to run with my phone, but it's damn heavy, and of course, a phone is precious and I don't want it getting water or sand in it. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere, as a wise man once said. So I got this cheap wristwatch on the internet. The cheapest possible wristwatch, which isn't even set to the accurate time. So I just know that if I start at 6:21 on the watch, and I want to run for an hour as I did this time, I need to turn around at 6:51 to be back home at 7:21. Most days when I run every other day, I finish within 2 to 3 minutes of that. It varies very little. So I did my usual run. Nothing too noteworthy happens. At one point, I see this guy running his ATV on the sand, and I think he's not supposed to do that. The first time I'd seen him out, saw him one other time, I saw him in a construction vest and helmet, and I thought he worked for the city. But this time I thought I think he's doing that on purpose. He wants people to think that he's on official city business. Really, he doesn't want to be identified, thus the helmet, because he's not supposed to use his ATV here on the sand. Then, shortly after seeing him, I see a kid standing on a small cliff yelling. He's just yelling at nothing, going like, "Ah! Ah!" loudly towards the spot I passed through. At first I wondered if that was the mentally ill, disturbed person I have seen in that area, who I've also seen yelling around there, live in San Francisco. He seemed younger, like 10, and wearing a nice puffy jacket. Nice clothes are often a tell that a person isn't homeless. I get close to the turnaround point. I thought about checking my watch earlier, but I decided no. I don't want to tease myself with being able to turn around when it's not time. I'll check when it's closer to the time. So I check at what seems like the earliest possible turnaround point. And it's something 08. It should be something 51. I do the math, around 17 minutes off. Did the watch malfunction? I'm not sure. How did this run take so long? I run back. I note, weird. That kid is still yelling. He was yelling 15 minutes ago, still yelling. Whatever. ATV guy is still there a little past him. On the way back, we seem to stay in each other's sights. As he's headed in my direction, goes past it, then comes back. This time I'm much more focused at the end of my run on my watch. And it reads perfectly, exactly as expected when I finish, something 38. It took 30 minutes. We're back in normal time now. Watch isn't malfunctioning anymore, if it ever was. Note it wasn't. So I remember now. I have a second source of truth. I looked at the stove when I left. I check it when I get back to my room. It says 11:23 or so. Weird, that matches up with what I would expect if the wristwatch time is accurate. So the run took 1 hour, 17 minutes. But how? I decide to check Google Maps for the first leg of the run. How long that would take at that speed? According to Google Maps, 47 minutes is how long it would take to walk to the turnaround point. Which seems about right if I'd actually walked, but first of all, I was running. I know it. And secondly, even if I had been walking, I would have been frigid from the sea wind and getting continuous feedback from my body to run and warm the hell up. Because I was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. I'm not so physically tough that I can walk in 60-degree weather into a stiff ocean breeze and not even notice. I notice every second and be very uncomfortable. In fact, I went out today and tried walking in that outfit and was like, yep, confirmed, this is very cold and very unpleasant. I only walked for 1 or 2 minutes and noticed I was cold and disliking it the whole time, before turning back to return to my place. One more thing. As a runner, when you run in one direction, then come back the way you came, you are faster on the way back. They call that negative splits. Normally it's like, I finished 2 minutes faster, hooray. It's not easy. This time in my negative splits, I finished almost 50% faster. Like 2 decades ago, I could actually, with maniacal focus, pull off negative splits. But never anything in this order. Even a measly 10% improvement would have been impressive. This blows me away. I'm decades older now too, so I don't get it. It's like from 1 second to the next, I was catapulted 17 minutes into the future. There was no perpetual tell from me. It was a totally normal run. Totally normal experience. Except I lost 17 minutes on it. I'll finish by mentioning a couple of things that could or could not be relevant. There was a story of a runner disappearing in the Bay Area. Someone said it sounded like a David Paulides story, the missing 411 guy. I said, no it doesn't. Sounds like a normal runner falling off the trail. Nothing eerie about it. I commented on this and then went on my run. They were very close together. Then this morning I had a dream I remembered, where one moment stood out. I was in a very dreamlike situation, in the classroom auditorium. There was a bowling ball that rolled loose from high up in the seats, where I was, and rolled down to the bottom of the auditorium. I chased after it. At the bottom, I remember I was swaddling it in a cloth, and moved it next to a little door, like a fairy door. Then I remember thinking, move it away, the fairy folk aren't going to like that. And I had a feeling like I'd screwed up, but I tried to make it better. I'd make the attempt. And I swaddled it and moved it away from the door a little. I don't have any good explanation for all this. I'm sure my run was 17 minutes longer than usual, all in one leg too, on what should have been the faster one. I got more confirmation of this today when I checked to see what time 21 on my wristwatch meant on the stove clock, and it was 04, exactly as expected. Everything suggests the run took 1 hour 17 minutes, except the time is so much longer than I would have had to been walking it on the way out. And I would have had to have been so much faster on my way back that I found a power-up which doesn't compute. My take? I have no idea what happened, but I'm going to be more respectful around the ravens next time I run across them. Next time I'll take the long way around. Still, that's not an answer, and while I don't think I'll get one, I'd like to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. 9. So to start off, in late 2019, my wife was in her last year of nursing school. Her birthday is in December, and as a gag gift, I bought her one of the giant bottles of hand sanitizers, like the big ones with the pump on them. This was before COVID came into the spotlight in the United States where we live, and was just being talked about sparingly as an unusually high amount of pneumonia cases in China. With her being a student in many different hospitals and nursing homes, this giant bottle of sanitizer quickly became the partner to our welcome rug inside of the front door, on a table, of course. When COVID hit, we started using it a bit more, obviously. We didn't go overboard, though, because this was during the time of hand sanitizer and, of course, toilet paper being a lot harder to get in the States. By the time we were down to the bottom of the container, it was still difficult to find, and we both weren't necessarily too insistent on buying more since we practiced regular hand washing. At the time, we were restricted to one income so she could focus solely on school. And I didn't have the money to go buy another container either. Prices were high. One night before bed, we both noticed that we were about out. It wasn't like a huge deal or anything. It's just one of those quick conversations about it and how neither of us had the money to get another. We decided to postpone getting more until the supply rose in stores and the price came down. Like I said, we were broke as hell. We both went to bed after this conversation. She had to get up early to go into the hospital. The next morning, I was getting the kids ready to go to their aunt's, and I noticed there was drastically more in the bottle than there was the previous night. Like this bottle went from nearly empty, only about an inch left in the bottom, to nearly half full. I took a closer look and quickly saw that it wasn't just some type of illusion created on the inside of the container from the product stuck to the sides. I messaged my wife after dropping the children off and asked her if she came across some more sanitizer and added it to the container. She told me she did not, and, politely, reminded me of the conversation we had the night before. You know, the typical, "Are you freaking serious? We just spoke about this," type of comment. I put this off to the back of my mind and went along with my day. When I got home after work, she asked me if I was messing with her when it came to the sanitizer. Apparently, she didn't bother to look. Who would really if they were in a hurry? At the bottle before she left in the morning and noticed it when she came home. It was enough for her to be concerned about it since it definitely was a major difference. And we were starting to worry about someone breaking in at this point. Our kids were 4 and 2. Their fine motor skills were a bit too underdeveloped to be able to add anything to it if they suddenly came across a surprise bottle somewhere during the night or early evening, especially without leaving a major mess at the remnants of it. Only my mother-in-law had a spare key to get into the house, and she lived a solid 25 miles away from us. The option of her driving half an hour in the middle of the night just to quietly come in and add hand sanitizer to our bottle was and is too outlandish to be a possibility. In fact, given the state of the country at the time, the idea that anyone would do this was far-fetched. We thought that if someone were to break in, that they would have stolen the bottle before they gave us more. We never came to a conclusion about how it happened. Neither of us really chased after what happened, especially because of how intense things with COVID were getting. People started dying. My wife was super involved in hospitals and college, and we went into lockdown. I've thought about it for 2 years now, and just came to the conclusion that something out of the ordinary happened. I don't necessarily have an explanation for it. It's just one of those things in my life that I've experienced that I don't have an answer for. No one broke in. There was no extra bottle anywhere. Neither of us went and got more at the time. It was not diluted with anything. And we don't know how it happened. The amount that was added stayed, as in it was like we got a partial refill, not that it stayed at that level forever. Once the bottle emptied again, we threw it out. This is not the first incident of high strangeness either one of us has experienced in our lives. Also, we have both had and cleared mental health evaluations somewhat recently due to employment. She is a public health nurse for the country we live in, and I myself work at a decently sized tech company. 10. My mom taught me how to crochet when I was 9 years old. Except during the time I was married to my first husband, I have continued to crochet. I don't know when I acquired it, but I have a pretty copper-colored crochet hook that I use and take with me everywhere I go. I know it sounds strange, but it's my favorite hook. Probably because I love the color. About a month ago, my husband and I were running around town paying bills. I had my crocheting with me since my phone was acting up. I have an adopted daughter who got married in December. I told her I couldn't afford to buy her a wedding present, so I would make her an Afghan as a wedding present. Yes, I know it's July and 7 months after Sarah's wedding, but I've had other projects to get out that were unexpected. I was working on it in the car, and I got out to go into an office to pay a bill. When I came back out, I thought I'd lost my favorite hook outside since neither my hubby and I could find it in the car. I was sad about losing it, and have never seen a hook like it. They normally come in green or blue. I was lying in bed this morning and had a pair of nail clippers, cutting a hangnail. When I put the clippers over my bedside table, I didn't get them over far enough, I wasn't looking, and the clippers fell on the floor under the bed. I bent down to get the clippers, and there, right there beside my clippers, was my copper crochet hook. A glitch in the matrix, maybe, although I'm glad I found it. 11. I used to live in Florida, in Utampa. It was the suburbs section, right outside of the university area. I lived with a friend of mine, and one day I borrowed her truck to go to the 7-Eleven right by her house to get a sugar-free Red Bull. So I pull up to the 7-Eleven, that's about 2 minutes away from her house. The one I always go to. I go inside, grabbed my Red Bull, and got in line. I felt like it took forever, which I never mind. I always fill the wait time with a little reading. Usually, but this time I felt like I was standing in that line so long that my feet actually started to hurt. It was a weird feeling. The second I was about to put my drink down and leave it, it was my turn to pay, and I was finally at the door. Here is where the weird part comes in. There is another 7-Eleven about 8 minutes away from my friend's house, and that is the 7-Eleven I walked out of. I opened the door, walking out as I was still looking at my phone. I looked up, and I was at the 7-Eleven that was 8 minutes away from my friend's house. But I just went into the one that was 2 minutes away from her house. I wasn't drunk. I don't even drink. No drugs. I wasn't overly tired or sick. It was real. I somehow walked into one 7-Eleven and out of a different 7-Eleven. So I called my friend to tell her something weird just happened, and she started yelling at me. "Where have you been? I've been worried sick." I'm like, what? Felt like I was only gone for a few minutes, and not even long enough to go all the way to the other 7-Eleven. I knew the line was kind of long, and it took a minute to get through, but it felt like it didn't take longer than that. I hadn't gotten around to telling her that I felt like I went to one 7-Eleven and come out of another one, and she tells me that I've been gone for a couple of hours. So I told her I would talk to her when I got back to her house. I got in her truck. I backed out of the parking lot, put the truck in drive to pull away, and when I looked up, I was pulling away from the 7-Eleven that was 2 minutes away from her house. So from there I didn't look down or away from the road at all and sped back to her house, and when I got back to her house, I called her from the driveway and told her I was here. She said, "No, you're not. I'm outside waiting for you." I was in the same parking spot that I always use. Nothing changed. It was the same thing I did almost every day. At this point, I started to panic a little bit. So I pulled the truck out, put it in drive, drove around the apartment complex and back to her house. I went a different way, which ended in my friend's driveway, and she was out there with my kids and her kids. I asked how long they've been out there, and she said for about an hour. I went inside and looked through my Google Maps activity, and it showed that I had driven 31 miles away and then back. But I never stopped for a Red Bull, according to my Google Maps. I was sitting there drinking it. My mileage and my gas tank said otherwise. A couple of weeks later, I got a vehicle and decided to move in with my now husband, and I've never had that problem again. My friend won't even let me talk about it. It horrified her. I think I'm just chalking it up to an unexplained scientific thing. 12. This happened many years ago in college, but I still remember it vividly as if it happened yesterday. To this day, I have zero explanation for what I witnessed. I had just finished a workout at my school's gym, and per my usual routine, I would go to the men's locker room and wash my hands before heading home. I go to the locker room, and there is another kid that I don't know finishing up washing his hands and heading over to the wall-mounted hairdryer. I walk over to the sink, and as I'm washing my hands, I casually just look up at the kid through the mirror. Something compels me to keep staring at him, and after a few seconds I see his eyes turn white and roll up into his head, and he collapses onto the ground. I remember the smack of him hitting the ground vividly. I remember feeling the ground shake a bit vividly. I even remember him wearing a white and red t-shirt with black sweatpants. I immediately run out of the locker room to the front desk of the weight room, which is literally 10 feet away, and inform 2 trainers, one male, one female, that some kid just passed out in the locker room. Instinctively, they bolt to the locker room even before I finish my sentence. I even remember thinking, is she allowed to go in there? I run right in behind them. The whole sequence of events from when the kid hit the ground, really fucking hard, I must re-emphasize, to when the trainers and I ran back into the locker room was less than 10 seconds. To my complete shock, as we storm into the locker room, he is standing there drying his hands as if nothing happened. It didn't look as if he was getting up. He was standing there normally as if he'd been doing so for the past 15 seconds. The trainers, looking confused as fuck, it's a small locker room so they could see no one who was passed out in there, look at me and I run up to the kid. Dude, you just passed out, I saw you. No I didn't. Yes you did. No I didn't. I saw you, did you forget or something? At this point, the trainers step in and start asking him questions. I, completely confused, befuddled and embarrassed, skulk out of there and just walk home. I did not sleep, replaying the event over and over again, trying to understand what I saw. I thought maybe it was a prank of sorts. But even then, for him to get up so fast would have been tough. He was not athletic looking at all, and the way he hit the ground did not appear acted or planned. Furthermore, this was solid concrete flooring. I would think it would be impossible to take a fall with such a loud impact and not be injured. Anyways, to this day I have no explanation, other than I must have somehow stepped into an alternate dimension, where this kid had a seizure or some shit. And when I stepped out of that locker room, I snapped back into ours. 13. As part of my job, I occasionally receive PDF scans of these legal documents, the details of which need to be entered into a certain system. To not get too specific, they basically say that Party A has agreed to pay Party B X number of dollars for this service on this date, and this is a one-time exception to the usual rates. I don't see them often, probably less than once a month on average, but they're important to track, so I have to make them a priority when they do come through. On Wednesday, one of these documents comes into my email. I look through the document, enter the details into the system, and I email back the identification number for where the information has been entered. Today, Friday, I get 2 more. 3 in 1 week is unusual, but nothing to write home about. I do one, move on to the second one when I realize this second request sounds very familiar. It sounds a lot like the item I entered into the system on Wednesday. I go into my sent email, find the file ID number I emailed them back, and pull it up in that system. Sure enough, it's all an exact match to the request I just received. Must be a duplicate request, right? Everyone makes mistakes. No big. I start writing an email explaining this is a duplicate of the request you sent on Wednesday. Here is the file ID number for that information that was already entered into the system. And just to cover all bases, here's a screenshot of the email you sent on Wednesday with this exact same information. Only when I go to take that screenshot, I notice that the information isn't the same. The email she sent me on Wednesday is different. I started looking through it. Everything is different. Names, dates, amounts, none of it matches the information I entered into the system on Wednesday in response to this email. Somehow I entered information into the system on Wednesday that I didn't receive until Friday, and completely ignored the information I received on Wednesday. I racked my brain for an explanation. Maybe she sent 2 emails on Wednesday and I responded to the wrong one? No other emails in my box or deleted folder with one of these. I spent half an hour trying to track down something to explain how I did what I did. I have not been able to answer that question, and it bothers me a lot. 14. In college, I lived with my great-aunt and uncle in a rural house they built when they got married, about 40 years prior to this. It was an unassuming ranch-style house with an unremarkable history. All my relatives lived in this area, and I grew up in the woods and creeks, and we had a small community church in the hollow that consisted mostly of my family members. The road my great-aunt and uncle lived on had a party line until the late 80s, so it was pretty isolated. I was facing homelessness my second year of college. They found out and invited me to live there. It was a long commute, but I was desperate. When I arrived with my things, they gave me the middle bedroom. I was not surprised to see that nothing had changed at all over the years. Same decor, same furniture, even the same old car, but all of it immaculately cared for. I was 22 or 23 at the time, and had a rigorous schedule between work and school. Because I lived so far away, I didn't come home during the day between classes or before work. Every day, except weekends, my clock went off at 6 a.m. I left no later than 7 a.m., and didn't get home until 9:30 to 10 p.m. My alarm clock was a black, round metal clock with the basic 2 bells on top. You had to spin a knob on the back that would move a little metal band, and whenever the hour hand matched up with the alarm hand, the alarm would sound. Since the clock could not distinguish between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., I would physically turn the clock off in the morning by pushing down the little switch on the back, and before I went to sleep, I had to turn it on by pushing the switch up. I never failed at this, and the alarm time was never changed. One afternoon, I got the evening off unexpectedly, and was excited for the rare leisure time that stretched before me. But when I got home, great-aunt and uncle weren't there. This was extremely strange. He couldn't drive, and she couldn't see well, so they went 3 places. Church, down the road, the grocery store, a little further down the road, and sometimes the doctor, who was in the nearest town. I looked at my car clock, and it was about 3:25. I was definitely startled they weren't home, but I didn't think anything weird about it. I checked the mail, lowered the garage door, they were manual, walked inside, and immediately heard something. It sounded like a kitchen timer, but I was in the kitchen, and the sound was further into the house. I slowly walked through the living room and turned to go down the hall. All the bedroom doors were shut like normal, but once in the hall, I could tell the sound was my alarm clock going off. I got a little irritated because my first thought was they had been messing around in my room. I opened the door and looked at the bedside table where my clock should have been, but it wasn't there. I could still hear it, so followed the sound around to the far side of my bed. The side of my bed was pushed against a wall, and maybe a 2-foot clearance between the bed and the wall. In the middle of this wall was a small window. The clock was lying face down on the carpet, under the window, between the bed and the wall. I picked it up and turned it off. When I flipped it around to look at the face, the alarm had been set for 3:30, and the plastic cover that protected the face was missing. I looked around the room looking for signs they had been in there to maybe move something or look for something. Everything was normal. I started looking for the plastic clock cover. There was a smaller twin bed on the opposite wall, and I found the plastic cover under that bed next to the bedroom door. My great-aunt and uncle got home about 15 minutes later. They had been to the grocery store. I asked if they used my clock that day, and they said they didn't. I believed them because they never used it before and had their own clocks. I asked if they had been in the room at all. She said no. I believed this too because I had never seen them in my room for anything. They'd left that morning at 10, heard nothing, and got back after me. They didn't seem to think I was making it up, but they didn't seem bothered either. I think they said something along the lines of, "Well, that's strange," and just acted like it was the most normal story in the world to hear. We never did mention it again. Nothing else ever happened with the clock. But something else glitchy happened to my room about a month later. But that's another story. 15. Adding to my personal collection of weird stuff and glitches. I think I just met someone who was supposed to be my best friend. This happened at the mall today, so I'm writing this as fresh as it comes. I was browsing the electronics store when I noticed some guy walking towards me. Usually, I'm not so good on recognizing faces in the crowd, but when I saw this guy, I felt like I knew exactly who he was. This is my best friend. Not just a friend, one of my besties, actually. I know him. So without even thinking, I went up to say hi. You know when you get excited when you see your close ones appear out of nowhere randomly? That's how both of us felt at this moment. We even fricking hugged each other at the start. "Sup, mate? Skipping work, huh?" he said. "Decided to have a day for myself. Feeling so lazy. Where's your girlfriend? How is she?" "Ah, same. She's at work, doing great." We talked for a good bit about some bullshit in the store, laughed like idiots on the same jokes, and then decided to part ways. The sudden realization hit me when I got out of there. I don't know this guy. It's not that I can't remember him. I actually have not the slightest clue on what his name is, much less about his freaking girlfriend. So why did I just ask him how she's doing, and how the hell did he know about me skipping work? I was so confused. I went down to the first floor and saw him passing again. We politely smiled at each other, but this time I saw him, looking as confused as I am. So here I am, still thinking about what happened there. Was it pure chance that two complete strangers have considered each other best friends for 3 minutes? Was it just a glitch that made us friends for a short while, and then reversed it? Or were we just two socially awkward idiots with memory issues? Anyone else encounter something like this? 16. In December, I had my own experience. I'm still pretty mind-blown by it, but I figured I'd share. I live in a small subdivision, evenly spaced houses, quiet neighborhood. I live close to Nashville, but far enough that we don't get much light pollution. We get really good views of the stars and moon, especially in the wintertime, and especially this past year, seemingly. I was in my room playing guitar when one of my friends texted me and asked, "Have you seen the moon today? You should check it out." This was sent at 10:45. The Great Conjunction had just happened the night before, and we had been discussing space, the moon, etc., a lot leading up to it. That night it was pretty cold, but I wasn't tired, so I figured I'd step outside and check it out for a second. I put on some warmer clothes and walked out the front door, where at this time in the night I typically see the moon directly from my front porch. However, when I stepped out, the moon wasn't there, but I could see the moonlight bouncing off the top of my car in the driveway. There were no clouds, and it can pretty much light up my whole neighborhood on clear nights. I realized the light was coming from behind my house, so I took a right off my front porch to walk around the side. This is where everything got weird. I remember turning the corner of my house and saw the moon sitting over my neighbor's house. It wasn't a full moon, but cut in half from left to right. Think 9 to 3 o'clock. With the bottom half visible. I don't remember anything being unusual about it other than that it seemed higher than normal, almost as if it were full. I took about 20 to 25 seconds to check it out, making sure my eyes were completely adjusted to the brightness. And as I was about to pull away, I felt my whole body start to vibrate, almost a weird hum, and I felt compelled to stare at the moon. I started to stare even more intently and focus on my breathing, because it honestly felt like in the beginning of a DMT trip of some sort. That's the best way I could describe the feeling, and even though I was completely sober, I was completely overwhelmed with a euphoric dissociative feeling. The moon looked completely normal, sitting over my neighbor's house still. I'd estimate if I held my hand up to it, I could place 4 finger widths between the top of my neighbor's roof and the bottom of the moon. And then it started sinking fast, As I sat there watching the moon move at a steady rate, from fairly high in the sky to the ridge of the house and then out of sight, I was still frozen, confused by this out-of-nowhere natural trip feeling. And then watching the moon move almost sent me into a panic. Once it fell out of sight, I felt the trip wear off over the course of a few seconds, and I immediately looked around me, thinking my life might be some sort of weird Truman show. Ran back inside through my front door and to the back of the house where I knew I'd be able to see the moon where I saw it pathing. I looked at the clock on my stovetop. It was 11:03. The moon sat still behind the house and didn't move, or went back to moving at normal speed for about another 20 minutes, and eventually I had to quit looking at it to try to get some sleep. Anyways, that's my glitch. Still not sure what happened. 17. So my boyfriend and I were going on a really long drive late at night. I had been driving for about 3 hours before I was getting tired, so I pulled over and he started to drive. It was late for me, but wasn't for my boyfriend, so he was wide awake. After about 20 minutes of him driving is when it all started. We looked up at the night sky and saw a light in the sky a little larger and closer than a star that was sitting suspended in the sky, and as we watched it, it dropped and flew out and disappeared. We both looked at each other and knew we'd both just saw it. As we discussed what we saw and how it may have been an alien, there was a car 2 lengths ahead of us that crested a hill. As it disappeared over the hillside, we continued driving, expecting to see the same car as we crested the hill until we finally did, and there was a truck about 1.5 kilometers down the road. We then proceeded to ask each other where the car went, in shock of how close the car was, and now there was a truck. We then turned up the radio and proceeded to follow our Google Maps to our destination. As we continued, we hit a little town on the side of the hill where there was about 500 meters of just snow and black ice all of a sudden, after we had been on clean roads and in nice weather the whole time. The final one was that Google Maps took us on a different route than we normally go on, that increased our time to our destination by an extra hour, where it brought us in a logging road surrounded in swamp with a raccoon on the road that we had never been on before. We proceeded to speed to our destination, and we both now cannot fathom what happened that night. Conclusion: my boyfriend never really believed in aliens or glitches until this happened, and now he tells everyone this story and he still has no idea what went on that night. The light didn't disappear like it got too far away. Kinda like the light turned off, or it just immediately vanished. 18. So this happened last night, and neither I nor my friends who were with me can explain it. Myself and 2 friends were in the car. I was in the front passenger seat, my friend S was driving, and my other friend B was in the back seat. We'd all just gotten off work and were carpooling home. There were roadworks on the freeway, so we decided to take the back roads. The main road we take to get home is about 25 miles long, and there was nothing but open farmland. Nothing around us besides fields with cows, no houses, barns, nothing. And I've never once seen a pedestrian on this road. It was around 11:15 p.m. when we were about halfway down the road. We came around a corner, and there was a person standing in the middle of the road directly in front of our car. There was no time to stop before hitting him, but S hit the brakes and we all just braced for the impact, and I mentally prepared to call an ambulance for the man we were about to run over. But we didn't hit anything, or anyone. We came to a stop, and I turned around to look behind us, and there was no one there. Nothing. All 3 of us in the car saw him standing there, and there wouldn't have been anywhere for him to go. The road has a rock wall to one side and empty fields with nowhere to hide on the other. He was nowhere to be found. We called out to see if anyone was there or if they needed help, but got no response. I'm still a bit shaken by this. It was very clearly a person about to be hit by a car. He was short, but it was hard to tell his height from the car. He was wearing dirty jeans and a brown jacket, and it looked like his hair was either pulled back into a ponytail or just slicked back really well. And he looked right at us, with the exact expression you'd expect from someone about to be run over at 60 miles an hour. 19. So this literally just happened, and I have zero way to explain it. I even have photos, but they aren't really needed, really, because it would just be a photo of light bulbs. Unless you're picturing Christmas lights, or not Christmas lights. Anyways, I have a string of lights that came with 20 small nightlight type bulbs. Brand new, sealed in the package. They didn't come with any extra bulbs or fuses or accessories or anything else. Just a box with a plug-in string of 20 little round incandescent bulbs. I wanted to replace the glass bulbs with plastic LEDs, so I bought a box of 25 LED bulbs, the same size and style of what this string of lights came with. I opened up the box, unscrewed the 20 bulbs it came with, put them in a plastic tub, and opened the Amazon box of 25 LED bulbs. These bulbs were flat-packed in a square box laid out as a 5x5 grid with a single bulb in each space. No space for anything else. So I started screwing the new LED bulbs into the light strip. And once I was done, I took the 20 incandescent bulbs and put them in the box for safekeeping. But wait, I now have 21 incandescent bulbs in the tub. I didn't have 21 when I took them off the string. I double and triple checked that every bulb was replaced 1 to 1, and other than throwing all 20 into a tub for a short time, they have all only ever been in single bulb spacing. I have 5 LED bulbs in the box, I have 20 LED bulbs in my string of lights, I have 21 incandescent light bulbs. Both the string light box and the new LED box only had spacing for exactly what came in the box. Guys, I'm seriously stunned. I know it's a silly, small thing that isn't even close to the craziest glitches I've ever experienced. But it's almost like the mundane is more puzzling because I literally was standing right there with an empty container and I put 20 incandescent light bulbs in it, and somehow it came out with 21 incandescent light bulbs. Did they have a quantum duplicate? A carbon copy? Did my little tub of light bulbs somehow birth a child? My head is so confused. 20. Tonight my brother had come into my room, and we were just chatting randomly, when I bring up the topic of Wim Hof breathing techniques, and we were talking about how dangerous it is to go from one extreme temperature to another. This leads to him asking, well, you remember what happened to me in the hot springs that one time, right? And I was confused because I've never actually been to a hot spring, so I asked him to elaborate. He's also kind of confused that I'm confused, and he replies, it was when we all went to Banff in 2019, remember? And I'm like, no, I've never been to Banff. Or if I did, I was way too young to remember, which he disagrees with. He tells me that her whole family went on a day trip to Banff, and had gone to the hot springs. I ask if he's just mistaking it with the trip he took with our dad and their other friend, which is a common occurrence. But he clarifies that no, it was me, him, and our parents. I'm starting to get annoyed because I have no clue what the hell he's talking about, so we go downstairs to settle it. I ask my parents if they remember us going to Banff in the last few years, expecting them to be just as confused as I was. However, they immediately nod and confirm that we did go in 2019. They proceed to describe the whole thing, even mentioning the outfit I wore in the pool, some of the things I had said, a few people who we had interacted with, etc. But it's a complete blank to me. To this very moment, I have absolutely no memory of ever going to this place. My brother got me to look up pictures from the pool we were in. He even pointed out the exact spot my family was sitting in, and chose photos that matched the weather that day. But no matter what he shows me, nothing about it is clicking or bringing back memories. The location looked completely unfamiliar to me, albeit extremely beautiful. My memory is quite good as well, and I specifically remember 2019 being a very uneventful or bad year for my family, which makes it even stranger that I have no recollection of something as noteworthy as a trip to one of the most beautiful parts of my province. However, I am positive that I did not experience that day. Really freaks me out. Another strange aspect I should mention is that even though my family remembers this, they remembered going in different months. My dad believed we went in late February or early March as a late birthday present for my mom, and my brother thinks we went in mid-October. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Glitch Monthly, number 18. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories and sent in stories for use in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like the monkeys and juggle a squirrel and take a trip to the moon. Or something that makes sense, involving the like button and subscribing. Okay, where were we? I think, right, I have a little bit of business to do here. Let's see. Right. I have a shout out for the author of story number 2. Right, the Reddit username is Quello Carina. And I'm also linking to their YouTube and their Instagram, I think, if I've got that right. Yes. Cheyenne Maxey. On YouTube, and Cheyenne's profile on Insta, although the Insta didn't seem to be working for me, but that's the one I was given, so that's the one I linked. Head on over to the YouTube channel, have a bit of a look. Very, very relaxing energy they have. You might enjoy what you find there. Alrighties, let's see, that's what we have now. Right, we have both an anniversary shout-out and a birthday. I don't think there's an anniversary song, so there'll be no singing for the first one. But I'd just like to say, Bill, your lovely wife Evelyn, who's called Lovely on YouTube, so she knows, wishes you a very happy anniversary. 4 years today, on the 29th here. And I hope you're having a very lovely time. I just hope you're making time for each other is what I hope. And of course, I'm sure you are. Okay. And here's to another 4 years, you know? Right, well, next up, we have a birthday shout-out. And this one goes to... Let me make sure I'm allowed to say their name. This one is for Robert's significant other, and their name... this goes to Sasha Suicide. That's her name, not a suggestion. And today is Sasha's 28th birthday. I hope you're having a lovely time. May it be filled with cake, ice cream. If you're... Mostly ice cream, I suppose. If we're still getting a lot of heat, not as bad for me right now. But, yeah, lots of ice cream. And if you're into alcohol, why not? Go for it. I'm not going to judge. And to finish up, we'll have a little sing-song. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sasha. Happy birthday to you. Well, alrighty then. Glad I got all those done. I thought I was going to forget one of them, but well done me. And I think my next shout-out is start of August. That's fine then. Alright, I'm going to wrap things up here because this was a tough one to make. I left it 1 day later than usual. That's all to send for messages. And they just weren't coming in. This one took so much to get done. That's why it went up a little bit later than usual. Several hours later. But we got there in the end. And we will now, any stories we get after, because I did send lots and lots of them to make sure I had enough, that'll be less work gathering stories for next month. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.